Thank you, Jennifer. That's really nice. And thank you all for coming today on a Saturday. I actually had a great time last night for those of you who were able to be present at the opera that Milo and Gabriella created with the students and with Jennifer. And for those of you who missed it, it's kind of sad because it was a pretty amazing thing. And what I noted was just when they were talking about the work, the fluidity of the process. The fact that in terms of subject matter, they began with that they were going to do something about Frida Kahlo, and they decided, okay, it's going to be about Frida and Diego. In terms of story, Gabriella told this great anecdote about Milo working in her apartment with champagne flutes and salt and pepper shakers to try to map out the story. In terms of rehearsals, they went to rehearsal thinking that they were going to be sitting on stage, and Jennifer very early decided no, that wasn't going to be the case, and which led to a lot of other decisions about staging. So I feel like there's this misconception that people have about the creation of art and the creation of theater, which is that it basically kind of jumps out whole, that the author sort of has this idea, he or she writes it down, that's what it is, it gets put up, and the reality is much messier. The reality is that art is a process, and it's a search, and that we go on a journey when we create a piece. And we don't necessarily know where we're going to end up. And surprising things happen along the way. And it's those surprises, and it's the incongruities sometimes. It's the things you did not plan for, which really give a piece life. So I'm very honored to be kind of invited here today to talk with you for a little. And it seems to me most logical to talk about my own search and my own process in terms of form, that is, how it is that I came to write plays, how I approach a new work, how things get created, both in terms of form and in terms of content. A lot of the work that I've done has involved my East-West issues, my reflections on myself as an Asian American in a multicultural age. Those things, like the process of making an individual show, I've had a lot of surprises along the way, and I've changed my mind about things. And so that's essentially what I'm going to talk to you about today. So just, to start at the beginning, I actually am from around here. I was born in Los Angeles. The first place we ever lived was El Monte, which I think is just like the next town over. And my parents were immigrants. My father was from Shanghai via Taiwan, and my mother was a ethnic Chinese from the Philippines. And she came here to be a concert pianist. He came here because he always wanted to live in America, and they met at the University of Southern California at a foreign students' dance. And they stayed here, and they had us. So first I was in El Monte, and then we moved to San Gabriel, and I spent most of my childhood in San Gabriel, which, by the way, at the time, really didn't have a lot of Chinese people. Caucasian and Latino. So now I go back there, and it's so weird because all the Mexican restaurants are now Chinese restaurants. But when I was growing up, I didn't really think about my ethnicity as being particularly consequential. I knew I was Chinese, but I sort of thought it was a relatively minor detail, sort of like having red hair. It's interesting, but it doesn't ultimately have any greater significance than that. The one thing that I remember from my childhood, which it's a bit strange and it has to do with my ethnicity, was that when I knew that there was going to be a particular program on television, or I knew that there was going to be a movie that featured Asian or Asian American characters, I would go out of my way not to watch it. This was many decades ago. So I was growing up in a time when I would say that all the images of Asians could be characterized as inhuman. That is, you could they might be inhumanly good, like sort of the Charlie Chan model, the kind of, you know, wise Chinese detective guy, or they might be inhumanly bad, like, so they were villains, the Manchu, or evil Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese soldiers, depending on what nation America happened to be at war with. But, you know, they didn't seem like human beings, and in that sense, they were inhuman. So I always think of, you know, sort of stereotypes as not so much about what is the content of the stereotype, like, is the guy a geek, is the guy a gangster, I think it's really about stereotypes being bad writing. Stereotypes are two-dimensional, or one-dimensional figures. So they're people that don't seem human. So you had when I was growing up, you had the good guys who were too good, you had the bad guys who were too bad, or there was this cook on a show called Bonanza, but you didn't want to go up to be the cook on Bonanza. So I think I felt inherently that because these characters have faces that look like mine, that people watching them would have some sort of association between what they saw on the screen and me. And when in fact inside, I didn't feel like there was any real relationship between those characters and myself. So there was this kind of disjunction that I noticed as a kid that had a lot to do with how I perceived myself as an Asian in relation to the arts and media. But I didn't grow up in a theatrical family. We didn't go to the theater. I didn't know much about the theater up until like my freshman year in college. And I went to college. I went to school in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I mean, I thought I might go to law school because I knew I wasn't good at math or science, so I wasn't going to be a doctor. And then I was pretty verbal, so I guess I could go to law school, but that was all I knew. And my freshman year, we went and we saw some plays in San Francisco at the American Conservatory Theater. And I think the first two plays I saw professionally were Thornton Wilder's The Matchmaker and a production of Shakespeare's Winter Game. And I don't know, I saw these plays and I thought, I think I could do something like that. And it's a little hard to know why. I have a friend, the late playwright Harry Condoleezza, who once said that playwriting is the ultimate arrogance because you literally are putting words in other people's mouths. And I think that there was something about the idea of trying to create a world in my head and then seeing it come to life physically in front of me, which seemed very appealing. And so I began just sort of writing plays in my spare time. And I found a professor who was willing to take a look at them. And he said they were really bad, which they were. And that my problem was that I had the desire to write plays, but I didn't actually know anything about the theater. But the same professor turned out, he was a good guy, and he ended up kind of being my independent study guide. And we created sort of a playwriting major at my university, which did not have one then, and actually still does not have one today. So I started just basically seeing as many plays and reading as many plays as I could, and that essentially became my education. And I still think that is an incredibly important part of deciding to be a theater artist. And even today, as I continue to hopefully grow and learn more, it comes from seeing things. Because when you see shows, you are able to identify things that you really like, that you want to use, that you want to borrow, or even steal, as it were, or things that you don't like. I think seeing things that you don't like is really important too, because it teaches you your own taste and things that you don't want to, mistakes that you don't want to make in your own work. So I was, sort of trying to write plays, and then the summer before my senior year in college, I saw an ad I was home for the summer, I saw an ad in the LA Times that said, study playwriting with Sam Shepard. And some of you know Sam Shepard as a sort of amazing Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright. Some of you know him as a movie actor. Some of you may be aware that he's the longtime companion of Jessica Lange. But at the time, he was just a playwright. And it turned out to be the first year of something that, for many subsequent years, was significant event in Southern California called the Padre Hills Playwrights Festival, which was happened over here at the University of Laverne, which is, also basically, it's like about half an hour from here, further east near Pomona. But this was only the first year that they ever tried to do this thing, so there were only 2 of us that applied to be students, so we both got in. And at Padua, these writers, Sam Shepard, Irene Fernandez, I think Neela talks about having studied with her as well, Walter Hadler, Murray Mednick, a lot of these people began trying to teach us how to write more from our unconscious. So, at the time I went to Padua, I thought, okay, the way you write a play is you basically kind of structure a bunch of scenes. You create a treatment or something. First this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and then you execute that. And this made for plays that had a certain structural integrity, I guess, but didn't have much life to them. The late Nobel Prize-winning playwright Harold Pinker talks about the fact that you need to deal with your characters. Sometimes you do what your characters want, and sometimes your characters do what you want. But that presupposes that your characters have some life. Your characters have their own opinions. And at the time I went to Padua, I hadn't figured out how to bring my characters to life. So these exercises that were designed to help us write more from our unconscious were really also about trying to give life, trying to find the unexpected. I began by talking about the process of creating work that involves surprises, that involves the thing that you don't expect. And how do you make that happen? How do you kind of trick your mind into doing something that's surprising? So we would do exercises like, for instance, you might write as fast as you can, because that necessarily blunts the effect of the kind of censor or editor that's in your conscious mind that says, oh, this isn't good enough, or why are you doing this? You don't care about this. If you just have to keep writing no matter what, then you have to ignore that voice in your head. There's another exercise that I love, which is, okay, if we were doing a seminar right now, I would start you guys all writing like a 2-character scene. And we would go on, I'd have you write for like 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, I go, okay, stop and draw a line across the page. And now I want you to continue writing that same scene. But about every minute and a half, I'm going to give you a random word or phrase, like Memorial Church, or flip cam, or whatever. And it's your job to incorporate that into the dialogue. And you go, okay, have you guys done this many times? Okay, I love that exercise. That's a great exercise. And I find, anyway, that when you do this exercise, I actually learned that from Irene Fernandez. I stole that from her. And I find that when you do that, the second half of the exercise is usually more interesting than the first. And that, for me, represents how, like, if you're writing alone, you're writing a play, and this impulse comes into your mind that you don't understand, and you feel this strong sense that a character should do something. And sometimes you follow that, and it's actually taking you in a great place. So this exercise is somewhat more random in that it's really just the instructor sort of giving you a random phrase. But even that, having to deal with that, I think, gives the work a certain amount of life, oftentimes more so than just your own conscious mind controlling everything that can make happen. So at that time I started writing a play, which I eventually called FOB, which is a kind of a derogatory term that's used among Chinese Americans, or ABCs, American-born Chinese, for FOBs, or fresh off the boat. And what was surprising about this was that I went to Padua, as I said, not really thinking that I had any deep relationship with being Chinese or